Joel's hand hovered over the emergency door release, his finger trembling half a centimeter from the button. Through the thermal camera feed, he could see the giant ant's mandibles closing around Miller's leg. Miller was screaming. Everyone in the bunker was screaming. And Joel stood frozen, watching the temperature signatures blur as his vision narrowed to a tunnel. Someone shoved past him. Two someones. The ant's head separated from its body 3 seconds later, but by then Joel had already backed away from the screen, pressing himself against the cold metal wall, trying to remember how to breathe. That was 7 years into the end of the world, and Joel still couldn't look at them without his body shutting down. The bunker had been a subway maintenance facility once, back when cities existed above ground, and people moved through them without checking the sky for shadows. Now it housed 43 people, 42, after the ant took Miller, in converted storage rooms that smelled like recycled air and desperation. Joel lived in the smallest one, alone, because pairing up required the kind of future planning he couldn't manage. He spent his days in the kitchen, if you could call it that, a corner of the main chamber with salvaged camping stoves and dwindling propane tanks. He cooked the mushrooms they grew in the dark tunnels, the canned goods from earlier, better days, the occasional rat that found its way into the lower levels. He was good at it. Useful in a way that didn't require him to go outside or hold a weapon or do anything, except stay small and quiet and try not to think about the sound his mother's car made when it crumpled. "You did good today," Anya said, though her eyes said otherwise. She was being kind because that's what Anya did, led with compassion even when practicality would serve better. She ran the bunker through consensus and careful rationing and the kind of hope that Joel couldn't understand anymore. "You called out the thermal signature early. That helped." Joel nodded, not trusting his voice. He'd called it out and then frozen. Again. Everyone had seen. Again. "We're going to need to do another supply run soon," Anya continued, sitting across from him at the metal table. Around them, others were settling in for the night, partnered off into their shared spaces. "Food stocks are getting low." "I can stretch what we have," Joel said quickly. "Make the portions smaller, use more mushroom base." "Joel," Anya's hand covered his, warm and calloused. "It's okay that you stay inside. We need you here. Not everyone has to be out there." But everyone else was. Everyone except him and the 2 elderly mechanics who kept the air filtration running. Everyone else contributed in ways that mattered, that kept the bunker alive. Joel just kept people fed while they did the real work of surviving. That night he couldn't sleep. He never could after a breach. The sounds played on loop, mandibles clicking, Miller screaming, his mother's voice 7 years ago saying, "Run, baby, run, just run." Joel pulled himself from his cot and made his way to the communication room, a glorified closet with a salvaged ham radio that mostly picked up static. He'd started doing this months ago, scanning frequencies late at night when everyone else slept. He never found anything. Sometimes he heard fragments, someone counting in Spanish, a woman singing, once what sounded like a child crying before the signal dissolved. The world was full of ghosts on the airwaves, people calling into the void with no expectation of answer. Joel turned the dial slowly, hunting through the static. Nothing. Nothing. A burst of something that might have been music, distorted beyond recognition. More nothing. He was about to give up when a voice cut through, clear enough to make him jolt upright. "Colony 7 to anyone listening. This is Colony 7, coastal sector, requesting status updates from inland positions. If anyone can hear this." Joel's hand shot to the transmit button. "Hello, hello, this is..." He didn't know what to call himself. Not a colony, just a bunker full of people trying not to die. "This is Joel. I'm inland, northeast sector. You're coming through." Silence, then, "Joel, holy shit, there's actually someone." The voice changed, became more focused. Okay, I'm Amy Chen. We're a coastal settlement, about 50 people. We've been trying to reach other groups for months. Where are you exactly?" Amy Chen. The name meant nothing for a full second. Then it hit him like a physical blow. Amy, his voice cracked. Amy from Fairview, from before. The silence stretched longer this time. When she spoke again, her voice was different, smaller. Joel Martinez. Yeah, it's me. Oh my God, she laughed, and it sounded like crying. I thought everyone said the cities were completely overrun. I thought you were dead. I thought the same about you. Joel's hands were shaking. Amy, 7 years. The last time he'd seen her, they'd been 17 and the world was ending and she'd been pulled into an evacuation bus while he'd screamed her name. Where are you? Where's your colony? Coastal sector, like I said, west, by the ocean. Static crackled between them. Joel, I can't believe we have to. How far west? What? How far? How many kilometers? More static. Amy's voice faded in and out. 40, maybe 150, I'm not, signals breaking up. Joel, I have to. Wait, but the frequency dissolved into white noise. Joel spun the dial frantically, trying to recapture it, but she was gone. He sat in the dark communication room for a long time, staring at the radio. Amy was alive. Amy was 140 kilometers away. Amy was on the coast, which meant near water, which meant relatively safer from the creatures who avoided salt and moisture. 140 kilometers. People didn't travel anymore. Not distances like that. The surface belonged to them now. The things that used to be small and manageable, that used to die under boots and newspapers. The world above was their territory, and humans survived by staying hidden and small and very, very still. Joel had never been more than 50 meters from the bunker entrance in 7 years. But Amy was alive. He told Anya the next morning, during the breakfast prep. She listened while stirring the mushroom porridge, her expression carefully neutral. That's wonderful, she said when he finished. I'm so glad she survived. I'm going to find her. Anya stopped stirring. Joel. I know what you're going to say, but I need to do this. What I'm going to say, Anya said carefully, is that the average survival time for someone traveling alone on the surface is 4 to 6 hours. That's what our scouts report. 4 to 6 hours before something finds you. I'll be careful. Joel, you freeze when you see them on a thermal camera. How are you going to survive when they're right in front of you? She wasn't being cruel. That was the worst part. She was being honest. You'll die out there. Then I'll die trying to reach her instead of dying slowly in here. The words came out harder than he intended. I'm not useful here, Anya. Everyone knows it. I freeze. I hide. I take up resources that should go to people who actually contribute. That's not true. It is. Joel set down the ladle he'd been holding. And I'm tired of it. 7 years I've been afraid. 7 years I've been waiting to feel like a person again. Maybe I won't make it to Amy. Maybe I'll die in the first hour. But at least I'll die trying to keep a promise instead of just existing. Anya was quiet for a long moment. Then she nodded once, sharp and final. Okay, when? Tomorrow morning. That's not enough time to prepare. I don't think more time will make me any more prepared. Joel met her eyes. I think I just need to go before I lose my nerve. That afternoon, the bunker residents gathered to help. It was strange seeing their faces, people he'd lived with for 7 years, eaten meals with, shared space with, but never really known because he'd been too caught in his own paralysis to connect. They brought him things: a backpack, a canteen, dried food that would last weeks if he was careful, a knife that someone had sharpened until it gleamed. Marcus, one of the scouts, brought him a crossbow. Quieter than guns, he said, demonstrating the loading mechanism. And we actually have bolts for it. Not many, so make them count. I don't know how to use this. Neither did anyone until they learned. Marcus pressed it into Joel's hands. You point, you squeeze, you reload, that's it. Don't overthink it. Anya brought a map. Not a real one. Those didn't exist anymore for the world above. This was hand-drawn on salvaged paper, compiled from scout reports and pre-apocalypse knowledge and radio chatter with other bunkers. It showed the rough geography between here and the coast, marked with notes. Avoid the industrial sectors, too many places for them to hide. The forests are dangerous but navigable if you're quiet. Water sources here, here, and here, but test them first. We don't know what the radiation did to the groundwater. Joel stared at the map, trying to commit it to memory. 140 kilometers. It looked impossible on paper. It would be worse in reality. "Which way is west?" he asked, and the silence that followed was heavy with meaning. He didn't know. He'd never needed to know, living underground where directions meant tunnel branches and room numbers. Anya showed him, explained that the sun rose in the east, set in the west, that he could navigate by it during the day, by the stars at night if he could see them through the ash clouds that still lingered in some areas. She made him repeat it until she was satisfied he understood. "The coast takes 7 days on foot if you push hard," she said. 2 weeks if you're being careful. You'll need to find shelter each night, somewhere defensible. Never sleep on the ground. Never stay in one place too long. Joel nodded, absorbing information he should have learned years ago. Everyone else knew this. Everyone else had been taught survival in the early days during the chaos. Joel had been taught how to hide and wait for someone else to save him. That night he couldn't sleep again. He lay on his cot, staring at the ceiling, listening to the bunker's familiar sounds. The hum of air filtration. Someone coughing 3 rooms away. The distant drip of water from pipes that would need maintenance soon. These sounds had been his entire world for 7 years. Tomorrow he would leave them behind. He thought about Amy, tried to remember her face clearly, but 7 years had worn the details smooth. He remembered her laugh. The way she'd squeeze his hand 3 times, their private signal. The last thing she'd said before the evacuation bus pulled away. "Find me." He'd promised he would, and then he'd spent 7 years not trying. Joel closed his eyes and tried to sleep. Tomorrow he would start keeping that promise. Tomorrow he would walk out of the bunker and into the world that had killed his parents. Tomorrow he would either reach Amy or die trying. Either way, he would stop being afraid. Or he would die afraid, but at least he would die moving forward. The bunker entrance was a maintenance shaft that led up through 30 meters of collapsed subway tunnel. They'd reinforced it over the years, added camouflage at the surface, created a system of ropes and pulleys to move the concealing debris. It took 4 people to open it safely. Joel stood in the staging area at dawn, or what passed for dawn underground, marked only by the schedule they maintained to keep circadian rhythms intact. His backpack felt too heavy. The crossbow hung awkward across his chest. The knife was cold against his hip. Everyone had come to see him off. All 42 remaining residents crowded into the tunnel's lower section. They were silent. This felt like a funeral. Maybe it was. "You remember the signs?" Anya asked one more time, and Joel nodded. "Disturbed earth means burrowers. Slime trails mean slugs. Don't touch them, they're acidic. If you see webbing, go around, not through. If you hear clicking, run, because that's..." "Beetles," Joel finished. "I remember." "And if you freeze." "I won't." He didn't know if that was true, but he needed to believe it. Anya hugged him. She was small, barely reached his shoulder, but her grip was fierce. "Come back," she whispered. "Whether you find her or not, come back and tell us what you saw." Joel nodded against her hair, not trusting himself to speak. The pulleys creaked. The shaft opened above him, letting in a shaft of gray daylight. It looked thin and uncertain, like it might break. Joel put his hands on the climbing rope and pulled himself up. The world above was nothing like he remembered. He emerged into what had been a parking structure, now collapsed and overgrown. Vegetation had reclaimed everything, not normal plants but twisted versions, mutated by the same radiation that had changed the insects. Trees grew through concrete, their bark segmented and wrong. Vines thick as his legs strangled rusted car frames. The air smelled of decay and something else, something chemical and sweet that made his nose burn. Joel stood on the rubble, breathing surface air for the first time in 7 years. The sky was overcast, the sun a pale disk behind gray clouds. He couldn't see far. The cityscape had become a jungle, buildings draped in growth, streets invisible beneath layers of vegetation. Behind him, the bunker entrance sealed shut. He heard the mechanisms engaging, the debris sliding back into place. When he turned around, he couldn't tell where it had been. He was alone. Joel checked the sun's position, oriented himself westward, and started walking. The first hour was surreal. He moved through a ghost city, past cars that had been abandoned mid-evacuation, past buildings with doors still standing open. Nature had swallowed it all. He saw a traffic light growing through with fungus, a phone booth colonized by something that looked like coral. The world had become alien in 7 years. He didn't see any creatures. That should have been comforting. Instead, it made his skin crawl. They were here. He knew they were here, he just couldn't see them yet. The second hour, his back started hurting from the unfamiliar pack weight. His feet, soft from years of bunker floors, ached in the scavenged boots. He was breathing too hard, his cardiovascular system shot from years of limited activity. Every sound made him flinch, wind through hollow buildings, distant crashes as structures continued their slow collapse, birds that somehow still existed making calls he didn't recognize. The third hour, he found the first body. It was old, reduced to bones and scraps of clothing by time and scavengers. But it was human-sized, and it was lying in the middle of what had been a street, and Joel stood staring at it for a long time before he could make himself keep walking. The fourth hour, something moved in his peripheral vision. Joel froze. His hand went to the crossbow, but he couldn't remember how to unsling it. Couldn't remember the loading mechanism Marcus had shown him. Couldn't remember anything except the sound of mandibles clicking and his mother's final scream. The movement came again. Closer. Something low to the ground, moving through the undergrowth with a rustling sound that made Joel's vision narrow. He couldn't move, couldn't breathe. His body had made the decision without consulting him. Freeze, go still, maybe it won't see you, maybe you'll be invisible if you just don't move. The creature emerged from the vegetation. It was massive, easily the size of a large dog, its body segmented and glistening wet. A centipede, Joel's mind supplied uselessly. It used to be a centipede. Now it was a nightmare, its legs moving in hypnotic waves, its antennae questing through the air. Searching. It turned toward him. Joel tried to run. His legs wouldn't respond. He tried to reach for the crossbow. His arms were locked. He stood there, paralyzed, watching death approach with clicking legs and mandibles that could probably tear through his throat in one motion. The centipede got within 3 meters, 2 meters, close enough that Joel could see its eyes, multiple dark spots along its head segment, all focused on him. Then something hit it from the side. The creature went tumbling and Joel's paralysis broke enough for him to stumble backward. A shape, brown and fast, was attacking the centipede, darting in and out, too quick to focus on. Joel heard barking, realized he was hearing a dog. The centipede tried to fight back, tried to wrap around its attacker, but the dog was too fast. It went for the joints between segments where the armor was thinner, and after a few brutal seconds, the centipede stopped moving. The dog stood over the dead creature, panting. It was medium-sized, some kind of mixed breed, its fur matted and dirty. It had a red collar with a tag that caught the light. Joel and the dog stared at each other. "Thank you," Joel managed to say. His voice sounded broken. The dog tilted its head. Then it trotted over, sniffed Joel's boots, and sat down expectantly. Joel didn't know what to do. He'd never had a dog, never had any pet. His mother had been allergic. But this animal had just saved his life, and it was looking at him with an expression that seemed to say, "Well, Are you just going to stand there? Do you want to come with me? Joel asked, feeling stupid for talking to a dog. The dog's tail wagged once. That apparently settled it. Joel looked at the tag. It was old, the engraving worn almost smooth, but he could make out a name. Boy. Someone had named their dog Boy. The simplicity of it made Joel's chest hurt. "Okay, Boy," he said. "I guess we're doing this together." Boy stood and started walking west, looking back once to make sure Joel was following. Joel followed. 4 hours into his journey, he'd already nearly died once. He had 139 kilometers left to go. And somehow, impossibly, he wasn't alone anymore. They walked until the light started failing, and Joel's legs were shaking with exhaustion. Boy led them to what had once been a bus, now tilted against a collapsed building at an angle that kept one end off the ground. The interior was dry and defensible, with only one entrance. Inside, Joel found evidence of Boy's previous life. A sleeping bag rotted through in places, some empty food cans, and hanging from a hook carefully preserved, a woman's red dress. Boy went directly to the dress, sniffed it, and curled up beneath it, protecting it, or being comforted by it. Joel understood immediately. This had been Boy's person, and she was gone. "I'm sorry," Joel said quietly. Boy's tail thumped once against the floor, acknowledgement without absolution. Joel spread his own sleeping bag on the least damaged section of floor and tried to eat some of the dried food from his pack. His hands were still shaking. He'd frozen. Again. If Boy hadn't been there, he would be dead right now, torn apart by a creature that used to be something you'd step over on a sidewalk. 4 to 6 hours, Anya had said. He'd barely made it 4. But he was alive. That had to count for something. Outside, the sounds of the surface night began. Clicking, rustling, distant shrieks that might have been birds or might have been something else. Joel lay in his sleeping bag, crossbow within reach, and tried not to imagine everything that could tear through the bus's thin metal walls. Boy's steady breathing helped. The dog had survived out here alone. If Boy could do it, maybe Joel could too. He thought about Amy, 136 kilometers away, probably sleeping in a bed in a bunker by the ocean. She didn't know he was coming, didn't know he'd actually left the safety of underground. Would she be happy to see him? Would she even recognize him? Would he recognize her? 7 years was a long time. People changed. The world had certainly changed. Maybe the Amy he remembered didn't exist anymore, just like the Joel who'd made that promise was long gone, replaced by someone who cooked mushrooms and hid from shadows. But that was okay, because maybe on this journey, somewhere between here and the coast, Joel would become someone new, someone who didn't freeze, someone who could look at the creatures that killed his parents and fight back instead of breaking. Maybe. Or maybe he'd just die afraid, and Boy would be alone again. Joel closed his eyes and tried to sleep. Tomorrow he'd walk further. Tomorrow he'd try to be braver. Tomorrow he'd... Boy's low growl woke him. Joel's eyes snapped open. The bus was dark, only the faintest gray light coming through the windows. Boy was standing, hackles raised, staring at the entrance. Something was outside. Joel's hand found the crossbow. His whole body was shaking, but he managed to get the weapon pointed toward the door. Boy growled again, the sound vibrating through the confined space. Whatever was outside scratched at the bus's metal, testing, searching for a way in. Joel's finger found the trigger. He couldn't see what he was aiming at, couldn't even tell how big it was, but if it came through that door, he would have to shoot, would have to not freeze, would have to choose to fight instead of surrendering to the terror. The scratching continued for what felt like hours. Boy never looked away from the entrance, ready to defend their shelter. And Joel kept the crossbow raised, kept his finger on the trigger, kept breathing through the panic. Eventually the scratching stopped. Whatever had been out there moved on, seeking easier prey. Joel lowered the crossbow. His arms were cramping from holding it ready. Boy finally relaxed, circling 3 times before lying down again beneath the red dress. Joel didn't sleep the rest of the night. He sat with his back against the bus wall, watching the darkness outside slowly give way to gray dawn, and wondered if he would survive to see tomorrow's sunrise. 136 kilometers. He'd barely covered 4. This was going to be impossible. But Amy was waiting, and Joel had spent 7 years waiting. He was done waiting. When the sun finally rose enough to see by, Joel packed his sleeping bag and checked his supplies. Boy was already at the door, ready to move. "Okay," Joel said to the dog, to himself, to the memory of the girl he'd promised to find. "Let's keep going." They walked out into the second day of Joel's journey, into a world that wanted him dead, toward a destination that might not exist anymore. But they walked. The third day, Joel learned about poisonous plants. He'd been so focused on watching for creatures that he hadn't considered the vegetation itself might be deadly. Boy stopped him from eating berries that looked safe, but would have killed him within an hour. The dog had somehow learned what was edible and what wasn't, probably through trial and error that Joel didn't want to think about too hard. After that, Joel started keeping notes. He had a small notebook in his pack, emergency paper for mapping or messages, and he began sketching the plants Boy avoided, the ones Boy ate, the differences between them. He drew the creatures they encountered, a beetle the size of a car that thankfully ignored them, a spider web spanning an entire street that they had to go 3 blocks around. He wrote down everything because maybe, if he survived, this information would help someone else. Or maybe he just needed to feel like he was doing something useful besides barely not dying. The fourth day, they found other people. Joel almost missed them. He and Boy were moving through what had been a residential area, the houses now hollow shells wrapped in vines. A sound made him stop. Voices. Human voices. Speaking actual words instead of just screaming. He found them on what had once been someone's roof, now a fortified platform surrounded by crude barriers. 2 people. A man maybe in his 50s with gray threading his beard, and a girl who couldn't have been more than 14, armed with a bow that looked professional and well-maintained. They had weapons pointed at Joel before he could call out. "Don't move," the girl said. Her voice was flat, emotionless. "Boy, drop your pack, keep your hands visible." Joel did as instructed, his heart hammering. Boy growled low in his throat but didn't attack. The man studied them for a long moment. Then he lowered his weapon, a crossbow like Joel's but better made. "You're from underground." It wasn't a question. Joel nodded anyway. "I'm trying to reach the coast." "Alone?" "Yes." The girl laughed. It wasn't a kind sound. "You're going to die, probably tomorrow." "Marin," the man said warnly. Then to Joel, "How far have you come?" 4 days, maybe 30 kilometers. It sounded pathetic saying it out loud. "And you've survived." The man seemed genuinely surprised. "How?" Joel gestured to Boy. "He keeps saving me." The man and girl exchanged a look. Then the man sighed. "Come up, carefully. Your dog too. We're not going to hurt you, but if you try anything stupid, Marin will put an arrow in your throat before you can blink." "I'd put it in his knee," Marin corrected. "More painful, teaches a better lesson." Joel climbed up to their platform, Boy scrambling up after him. Up close, he could see they were well supplied. Solar panels charging batteries, water collection barrels, food that looked like it came from hunting rather than scavenging. These weren't just survivors. They were thriving. The man extended his hand. "Davis, this is Marin. We're surface dwellers, have been since the first year." "Joel," he shook Davis's hand, nodding the calluses, the strength in the grip. "You've been outside for 7 years." "Someone had to map the new world," Davis said. "The underground bunkers are safe, but they're prisons too. We chose freedom." "Freedom and constant mortal danger," Marin added. She was checking Joel over with an assessing eye that made him feel like a specimen. "You froze up today, didn't you, when you saw something? How did you? You have that look, like a bunker rat who's seeing daylight for the first time." She wasn't being cruel, just stating facts. "Your hands are shaking, you keep checking behind you, and your dog is doing most of the work keeping you alive." Joel wanted to argue but couldn't. She was right about all of it. Davis offered him water from a canteen that was actually clean. "Why the coast?" "Someone I knew before." Joel drank, trying not to gulp. "We made contact over radio. I promised I'd find her." "Romantic," Marin said flatly. "Stupid but romantic." "Marin," Davis said again, then turned back to Joel. "How much do you know about surface survival?" "Not much. I can barely work my crossbow. I don't know which creatures are aggressive and which aren't. I nearly ate poison berries yesterday." Joel set down the canteen. "I'm probably going to die out here, but I have to try." Davis and Marin exchanged another look, some silent communication passing between them. Then Davis nodded, seeming to come to a decision. "Stay with us tonight," he said. "Tomorrow too, if you want. We can teach you some things. Not everything, you don't have time for everything, but enough to maybe improve your odds from certain death to probable death." "Why would you do that?" "Because everyone who survives out here deserves a chance to keep surviving," Davis said. "And because you remind me of Marin when I found her. Determined but doomed. She made it. Maybe you will too." Marin snorted. "I wasn't that pathetic." "You tried to fight a beetle with a stick. The stick was on fire. You were 6 years old." They bickered like family, and Joel felt something twist in his chest. These two had built a life out here, in the ruins, while he'd been hiding underground. They'd chosen danger over safety and somehow made it work. "I don't want to impose," Joel started, but Davis waved him off. "You're not. Besides, it's too late to travel now. Sun's getting low and you don't want to be moving at dusk. That's when they hunt." So Joel stayed. He ate food they'd hunted, some kind of bird, mutated but still edible, and listened as Davis and Marin explained the new rules of the surface world. "The creatures follow patterns," Davis said, sketching in the dirt with a stick. "Beetles are territorial but mostly ignore humans unless you get too close to their nests. Ants are the opposite. They'll hunt anything, but they're slow and predictable. Spiders you just avoid. No fighting them, no going near their webs. Just avoid them entirely." "The sand stalkers are the worst," Marin added. She was cleaning her bow, her movements practiced and efficient. "They hunt in packs, they're fast, and they sense vibration. If you see disturbed earth, change direction. If you hear clicking that sounds like rocks hitting each other, run." "Run where?" "Anywhere. Water if you can find it, they won't follow into water. High ground, just run and hope you're faster." Davis showed Joel how to properly load and aim the crossbow, how to compensate for wind and distance, how to reload quickly under pressure. Marin demonstrated stealth movement, how to step without making noise, how to use debris and vegetation for cover. "You move like prey," she said bluntly. "Loud, obvious, broadcasting your location to everything within 100 meters. I don't know how to move any other way." "Then learn or die, those are your options." But despite her harsh words, Marin spent an hour teaching Joel the basics. How to roll his feet from heel to toe, how to control his breathing, how to become part of the environment instead of moving through it. It was exhausting and humbling and absolutely necessary. That night, sleeping on their platform with Boy beside him and two competent survivors nearby, Joel felt safer than he had since leaving the bunker. But he also felt the weight of how much he didn't know, how unprepared he was, how monumentally stupid this journey was. "Why did you really come with me?" Marin asked quietly. She was taking first watch, sitting with her bow across her lap. "The coast is weeks away. Your girl might be dead, might have moved on, probably doesn't even remember you clearly anymore. 7 years is a long time. I know. So why risk it? Joel thought about his answer. Because I stopped living 7 years ago. I've just been hiding and waiting and being afraid, and I'm tired of it. Maybe I'll die out here, but at least I'll die trying to be someone who does things instead of someone who just exists. Marin was quiet for a moment. Then, that's less stupid than I thought. Thanks, I think. You're still going to die, probably within the week, but it's less stupid than I thought. She adjusted her bow. Get some sleep, bunker rat. Tomorrow we're teaching you how to fight. Joel closed his eyes. Tomorrow he'd learn to fight. Tomorrow he'd be one day closer to Amy. Tomorrow he'd still be alive against all odds. Or he wouldn't be, and Boy would find another person to follow. Either way, tomorrow was coming. Joel had learned that much at least. The world didn't stop because you were afraid. It just kept moving, kept changing, kept demanding that you change with it or die. He was choosing to change. Finally, they stayed 3 days with Davis and Marin. 3 days of intensive training that left Joel's muscles screaming and his pride in tatters. But he learned. He learned how to shoot the crossbow while moving, how to reload while backing away from a threat. He learned the difference between creatures that would chase and creatures that would lose interest if you left their territory. He learned which plants could treat injuries, which water sources were likely contaminated, how to read the signs of creature activity. Marin made him practice stealth movement until he could cross their platform without making a sound. Davis taught him how to think tactically, how to plan routes with escape options, how to identify defensible positions for overnight shelter. You're never going to be good at this, Marin said on the 3rd morning, watching Joel miss a target at 20 meters. You don't have time to get good, but you might get lucky, and luck is better than nothing. Encouraging. I'm realistic. Davis is the one who believes in people. She retrieved his bolt and handed it back. You're not terrible anymore, though. You were terrible when you got here. Now you're just bad. Coming from Marin, that was practically a compliment. On the afternoon of the 3rd day, Davis pulled out a detailed map. It was better than Anya's, marked with recent observations, safe routes, danger zones. You're here, he said, pointing. You've covered about 40 kilometers in a week. Not bad for someone who started with 0 skills. The coast is here. His finger moved west. About 95 kilometers remaining. Joel studied the route. It looked impossible. Mountains, dense forest, what Davis had marked as major spider territory in red ink. There's a faster route, Davis continued, indicating a path that cut through the mountains. But it goes through the stalker breeding grounds. You won't survive that. The long way adds a week but keeps you in relatively clear territory. Relatively. Everything's dangerous now. Relatively just means you might make it. Davis folded the map and handed it to Joel. Take this. It's better than what you have, and Marin and I have this area memorized. I can't take your map. Yes, you can. We're staying here. You're moving on. Davis gripped Joel's shoulder. You've come this far. Don't waste it by getting lost. Marin appeared with a bundle. New bolts for your crossbow, a better knife, water purification tablets, use them, don't trust any water source, and this. She pulled out a small metal cylinder. Flare gun, 1 shot. Use it only if you absolutely have to. It'll attract every creature in a kilometer radius, but it also might save your life if you're desperate. Joel took the supplies, overwhelmed. Why are you helping me? Because you're trying, Davis said simply. That's more than most people manage. And because I don't want Boy to lose another person, Marin added, scratching the dog's ears. Boy had become attached to all of them over the past days, but he still slept next to Joel every night. He's good dog. Take care of him. I will. They left at dawn the next morning, Joel and Boy heading west while Davis and Marin watched from their platform. Joel looked back once and saw them standing together. the older man and the young girl who'd somehow built a life in hell. If they could survive out here, maybe he could too. The next week was hard. Harder than anything Joel had experienced in the bunker, harder than watching his parents die, harder than 7 years of nightmares. His body hurt constantly. His feet developed blisters that burst and reformed. He ran out of food and had to hunt, badly, wastefully, but successfully enough to not starve. Boy helped, always Boy helped. The dog seemed to understand the route they were taking, seemed to know which paths were safer. When Joel's judgment failed, Boy's instinct took over. They encountered creatures almost daily now. A massive centipede that Joel managed to drive off with crossbow bolts, not killing it but making it decide they weren't worth the effort. A spider that thankfully was focused on a wrapped corpse in its web and didn't notice them passing. Beetles. So many beetles. Some ignored them. Some had to be avoided. And once, disastrously, they encountered sandstalkers. Joel heard the clicking first, exactly like rocks hitting each other, just as Marin had described. He froze and Boy's hackles rose. Then he saw the disturbed earth, the telltale pattern of something burrowing just beneath the surface. "Run," Joel whispered, and they ran. The creatures erupted from the ground behind them, 4 of them, maybe 5, their bodies segmented and covered in sand-colored armor. They were fast, impossibly fast. Joel ran harder than he'd ever run, Boy racing beside him, and they weren't going to make it. Joel remembered the flare gun, remembered Marin's words, "Use it only if you absolutely have to." He absolutely had to. He pulled the gun, aimed behind him without looking, and fired. The flare screamed into the air, brilliant red, landing somewhere in the stalker's territory. The creatures hesitated, confused by the bright light and sudden noise. Joel and Boy ran. They ran until Joel's lungs burned and his legs gave out. They ran until the clicking was far behind them. They ran until Joel collapsed against a rusted car and couldn't move anymore. When he could finally breathe again, he checked his supplies. The flare gun was gone, 1 use only, but they were alive. "Good dog," Joel managed between gasps. "Such a good dog." Boy licked his face, which might have been affection or might have been checking if Joel was dead yet. That night Joel's hands shook so badly he couldn't write in his journal. He'd survived the stalkers, but barely, and he still had 60 kilometers to go. But he was still alive, still moving forward, still choosing to try. The next morning, Boy was gone. Joel woke in their makeshift shelter, an overturned delivery truck, to find the dog missing. He called for him, searched the immediate area, found nothing. No body, no blood, just gone. Joel tried to tell himself the dog had just wandered off, would come back, but deep down he knew Boy had left him, and Joel couldn't blame him. He'd been angry yesterday, yelling at Boy when the dog had tried to warn him about dangerous terrain and Joel had ignored the warning. He'd taken his fear and frustration out on the only thing that couldn't fight back. And now he was alone. Joel sat in the truck for a long time, holding his crossbow, trying to decide if he could do this without Boy, if he even wanted to try. He still had 55 kilometers to go. 15 days, maybe 20 if he was careful. 20 days alone in a world that wanted him dead, without the dog that had kept him alive this long. Joel thought about going back. The bunker was far behind him, but he could make it. It would take weeks, but he knew the route now. He could survive it. Except he couldn't, because going back meant being the person who gave up, the person who'd spent 7 years hiding. And Joel had learned something in the past 2 weeks. He didn't want to be that person anymore. Even if Amy was gone, even if she'd moved on, even if he reached the coast and found nothing but more disappointment, he needed to finish this journey, needed to prove to himself that he could. Joel packed his supplies and started walking. West, toward the coast, toward Amy or the memory of Amy, or just toward the idea that he was someone who kept promises. He walked alone and it was terrifying. Every sound made him flinch. Every shadow could hide death. Without Boy to warn him, Joel had to be constantly vigilant, constantly afraid. But he walked. The miles passed slowly. Joel's map showed he was getting close to the mountains now, the final major obstacle before the coastal region. He'd have to climb, find passes, navigate terrain that would be difficult even without the creatures. 3 days after Boy left, Joel encountered another centipede. A massive one, easily 6 meters long, its body segments gleaming in the gray sunlight. And this time, there was no one to save him. The creature saw him, or sensed him, Joel wasn't sure which. It moved toward him with terrible purpose, its many legs carrying it faster than Joel could run. Joel's first instinct was to freeze. His body tried to lock up, tried to shut down, tried to surrender to the terror like it had 1,000 times before. But something was different this time. Maybe it was the 2 weeks of training with Davis and Marin. Maybe it was the miles he'd walked, the creatures he'd faced, the nights he'd survived. Maybe it was just that he was tired of being afraid. Joel raised his crossbow and fired. The bolt caught the centipede in its head segment. The creature recoiled, mandibles clicking in rage. It wasn't dead. He'd have to hit it multiple times to kill something that size, but he'd hurt it. Joel reloaded, his hands moving through the motions Davis had drilled into him. The centipede charged. Joel fired again. This bolt hit near the first and the creature slowed, but it was still coming. Joel drew his knife. His good knife, the one Marin had given him. And when the centipede lunged, he didn't freeze. He dodged left, drove the knife into the segment joint behind its head, and held on while the creature thrashed. It took less than a minute. Less than a minute of terror and violence and Joel's voice screaming without words. And then the centipede stopped moving, and Joel was covered in its fluids, and he was alive. He'd done it, he'd fought, he'd won. Joel dropped to his knees, shaking, the knife still in his hand. He'd killed it. He'd actually killed it. Alone. Without Boy, without anyone. Just him and his own terrified, stubborn refusal to die. "I did it," he said to the empty ruins around him. "I fucking did it." A bark answered him. Joel's head snapped up. Boy was 20 meters away, sitting at the edge of what had been a street, watching. The dog's tail wagged once, slow and deliberate. "You left me," Joel said. His voice sounded broken. Boy barked again and started walking toward him. Joel understood then. Boy hadn't left. He'd been there the whole time, watching from a distance, waiting to see if Joel would freeze or fight. Testing him. Making sure he could survive without help. "You manipulative bastard," Joel said, but he was smiling. Crying and smiling at the same time, relief and anger and gratitude all mixed together. Boy reached him and pressed against his leg, and Joel hugged the dog, not caring that he was covered in centipede gore, not caring about anything except that he wasn't alone and he'd won, and he was still alive. "Okay," Joel said when he could finally breathe normally. "Okay, let's keep going." They walked west toward the mountains, toward the coast, toward Amy. Joel was different now. Harder, scarred. Someone who'd killed a centipede alone and survived. Someone who didn't freeze anymore. Someone who could finish this journey. The mountains took 5 days to cross. Joel's legs screamed with every step. His lungs burned in the thin air and he nearly fell to his death twice. But he climbed. He and Boy climbed and they didn't stop and they didn't give up. On the 6th day from the highest pass Joel saw it, blue in the distance. The ocean, the coast. He'd made it. Not to Amy yet, not to the end of his journey, but close, so close he could see his destination. Joel sat on a boulder, Boy beside him, and looked at the ocean for the first time in 7 years. It was still there, still vast, still beautiful despite everything the world had become. Somewhere down there was Amy's colony. Somewhere down there was the girl he'd promised to find. Joel stood, shouldered his pack, and started the descent. Another week, maybe. One more week of walking and he'd reach her. Whatever waited there, whether she remembered him, whether she'd moved on, whether she even wanted to see him, he would face it. He'd crossed 130 kilometers. He'd fought creatures that should have killed him. He'd become someone new. He could face one more truth. Joel and Boy walked down from the mountains toward the blue horizon, toward the end of their journey, toward whatever came next. The coastal region was different. The air smelled of salt and rot, the vegetation less aggressive, the ruins more intact. Creatures were sparse here. Most of them avoided the water, avoided the salt, avoided the open spaces where the sea breeze kept the air moving. It should have felt safer. Instead, Joel felt exposed. After weeks of dense urban ruins and forest, the openness made him nervous. He found Amy's colony on the 14th day of his journey, not through navigation or careful searching, but because he collapsed 50 meters from their hidden entrance. Joel's supplies had run out 2 days ago. The poison from leech bites he'd gotten crossing a marsh had finally caught up with him. He'd treated it with the plant remedies Marin taught him, but too late, without enough of the right herbs. The infection was spreading. He made it to within sight of the sea caves where Davis's map indicated Amy's colony would be. Made it to where he could hear voices, human voices, people talking and laughing like the world hadn't ended. Made it far enough to know he'd succeeded. Then his legs gave out. Boy barked. Joel heard shouts, saw people approaching, their faces distorted by his failing vision, felt hands on him lifting him. "He's burning up," someone said. "Get him inside. Call Amy," he keeps saying her name. Joel tried to speak, tried to explain that he'd come 135 kilometers to find her, that he'd kept his promise. But the words wouldn't come. Darkness was pulling him down and he let it. He'd made it. Whatever happened now, he'd made it. He woke in a clean bed in a room lit by electric light, actual electricity, bright and steady. His body hurt everywhere, but the pain was distant, manageable. Medical pain, not dying pain. "You're awake." The voice was familiar but different, older, changed by years. Joel turned his head. Amy sat beside his bed and she was real. Not a memory, not a ghost. Real. She looked older. Everyone did, but 7 years had sharpened her features, hardened something in her eyes. She wore practical clothes, her hair cut short, her hands scarred and capable. She was beautiful, and she was a stranger. "Hi," Joel said. His voice came out as a croak. "Hi yourself." Amy smiled, but it was complicated. "You actually came. When you said your name on the radio, I didn't think you'd actually try." "I promised." "That was 7 years ago. Before," she gestured vaguely, encompassing the end of the world. "Promises from before don't really count anymore." "They count to me." Amy was quiet for a moment. Then, "You almost died getting here. The medics said another day and the infection would have killed you. Why would you risk that?" "Because I spent 7 years hiding, being afraid, and I was tired of it." Joel tried to sit up, managed it with Amy's help. "I needed to prove I could do something, anything, even if it was stupid." It was definitely stupid, but she was smiling. "How did you survive out there, alone?" "I wasn't alone, I had Boy." Joel looked around. "Where is he?" "The dog? He's fine. He's been sitting outside your door for 3 days, waiting for you to wake up. We tried to feed him, but he wouldn't eat until he could see you were okay." Amy stood, opened the door, and Boy burst in, nearly knocking Joel over in his enthusiasm. Joel hugged the dog, feeling the solid reality of him, the warmth. "Good dog, best dog." "He saved your life," Amy said. "The medics said he'd been treating your wounds with plants, keeping you moving when you should have collapsed. That's remarkable." "He's remarkable." Joel looked up at her. "So are you, your colony, you have electricity, clean water. This is incredible. We got lucky, found a geothermal vent built around it, and the ocean helps. The creatures mostly avoid salt water. We're not safe, but we're safer than most." Amy sat back down. Joel, I'm glad you're alive. I'm glad you made it here, but I need you to understand something. Her tone made Joel's chest tighten. You've moved on. I had to. Amy's voice was gentle but firm. My parents died the second year. I was alone for so long, and then I met someone, Marcus. He helps run the colony. We've been together for a year. Oh, I'm sorry. I know that's not what you wanted to hear. But 7 years is a long time, Joel. We were kids when the world ended. We're different people now. Joel nodded slowly. It hurt, but it didn't destroy him, because Amy was right. They were different people. The boy who'd watched her evacuation bus drive away didn't exist anymore. And the girl who'd promised to wait was gone too, replaced by this capable woman who'd survived and built something new. I understand, Joel said. I think part of me knew that, but I had to come anyway to see, to know for sure. Was it worth it? Joel thought about the past 2 weeks. The terror, the pain, learning to fight, learning to survive, becoming someone who could face the world instead of hiding from it. Yes, it was worth it. Good, Amy squeezed his hand. Stay a few days, recover. I want to hear everything about your journey, and then, she hesitated. Then what? You can stay here if you want. We always need more people. Joel shook his head. I have to go back. My bunker, they helped me leave, gave me supplies. I owe them. That's over 100 kilometers. I know, but I made it here. I can make it back. Amy studied him, and Joel saw respect in her eyes. The kind of respect you give equals, not memories. You've changed. So have you. Yeah, she smiled. Want to tell me about it, about the journey? So Joel told her, about leaving the bunker, about Boy saving him, about Davis and Marin, about learning to fight, learning to survive, learning to not freeze, about the centipede he'd killed alone, about crossing the mountains and nearly dying and making it anyway. Amy listened to everything, and when he finished, she was quiet for a long time. That's incredible, she finally said. You should write it down, all of it. The things you learned, the creatures you encountered, that information could save lives. I did write it down, notes and sketches. I have a journal. Can I see it? Joel retrieved his pack. Someone had set it in the corner of the room and pulled out his journal. The pages were water-stained and dirty, but the writing was still legible. He handed it to Amy. She flipped through it slowly, her expression growing more focused. Joel, this is valuable, really valuable. Plant identification, creature behavior patterns, safe routes. She looked up. Can I copy this, share it with our scouts? Of course. Thank you. She held the journal carefully like it was precious. This could help a lot of people. They talked into the evening. Amy introduced him to Marcus, a former military officer who'd survived by being smart and adaptable and cautious. He was good for Amy. Joel could see that. And though it hurt to watch them together, he was also genuinely happy that Amy had found someone. The colony was impressive. 53 people living in a network of sea caves they'd fortified and made livable. They had gardens growing under UV lights, fish traps in the ocean, even a small library of salvaged books. It was a life. A real life, not just survival. Joel stayed 5 days, healing and sharing information. He drew maps for their scouts, showed them the routes he'd taken, warned them about the dangers. He told them about Davis and Marin, about the surface dwellers who'd chosen freedom over safety. And every night he slept in the clean bed and thought about his bunker, about Anya and Marcus and the 42 people who'd helped him leave. He missed them. He wanted to go home. On the 6th morning, Joel packed his supplies. Amy had given him better equipment, food that would last, a proper water filter, medical supplies. Marcus contributed a better crossbow and more bolts. The colony came together to help him prepare for the journey back. You don't have to leave, Amy said as they stood at the colony entrance. You could build a life here. I could, Joel agreed. But my life is back there, With the people who let me go even though they thought I'd die. I need to show them I didn't. You've changed so much. Amy touched his cheek, the gesture fond but not romantic. The Joel I knew before would never have survived out there. The Joel you knew before is gone. He died somewhere between the bunker and here. I'm someone new now. Someone better. Someone who doesn't hide anymore. Joel smiled. That's close enough. Amy pulled out a journal, her journal, filled with her own notes and observations. Take this, trade my knowledge for yours. Thank you. They stood looking at each other, two people who used to be in love, who'd survived the end of the world and become strangers. It should have been sad. Instead, it felt right. I'm going to miss you, Amy said. Again. Next time you come find me, Joel said. The journey's not as impossible as it seems. Maybe I will. Joel kissed her. She kissed him back. It was goodbye. It was thank you. It was I'm glad we both survived. It was I hope you find what you're looking for. Then Joel and Boy walked out of the colony, heading east back toward the bunker. The journey ahead was just as dangerous as the one behind, but Joel had done it once. He could do it again. He was someone who finished what he started now, someone who kept promises, someone who didn't freeze. The coast disappeared behind them as they walked into the ruins, 135 kilometers back to where he'd started. Joel shouldered his pack, checked that his crossbow was loaded, and kept walking. Boy stayed close, and together they headed home. The journey back took 3 weeks. Joel knew the routes now, knew where the dangers were, knew how to move and when to hide and when to fight. He encountered creatures, of course he did, but he was ready for them. The fear was still there, but it didn't control him anymore. He stopped at Davis and Marin's platform on the way. They were surprised to see him alive, even more surprised to see him heading back. You made it, Davis said, like he genuinely believed Joel would die. I made it. Joel shared supplies and information with them, told them about Amy's colony, drew them maps. She's alive, I found her. And Marin asked, sharp as ever. And she moved on, we both did, Joel smiled. It's okay, I needed to make the journey, not to get her back, just to prove I could. Marin studied him. You're not terrible anymore. From her that was high praise. Joel stayed one night with them, and in the morning he continued east. The ruins were familiar now. He recognized landmarks, remembered which areas were safe and which weren't. This was his world now, as much as the bunker had been. He belonged here on the surface, navigating the spaces between death. He reached the bunker on a gray morning that felt like every other morning since the world had ended. The entrance was exactly where he'd left it, camouflaged and secure. Joel used the signal knock they'd taught him, 4 quick, 3 slow, 2 quick, a pattern that told whoever was on watch that a friend was approaching. The entrance opened. Marcus, the bunker Marcus, not Amy's Marcus, stared at him. Holy shit, Marcus breathed. You're alive. I'm alive. Get in here right now. Marcus was pulling him inside, Boy following, and suddenly Joel was surrounded by people. All 42 of them, crowding the tunnel, touching him like they needed to confirm he was real. Anya pushed through the crowd. She looked at Joel, then at Boy, then back at Joel. Her eyes were wet. You made it, she said. I made it, Joel held up Amy's journal. And I brought back information, everything I learned, everything Amy's colony knows, everything that might help us survive. Anya took the journal with shaking hands. Then she pulled Joel into a hug that was hard enough to hurt. We thought you were dead. After 3 weeks with no contact, we thought. I know, I'm sorry, but I had to finish it, had to reach her. Joel hugged her back. And then I had to come home. That night the bunker gathered in the common area. Joel told them everything. About the journey, the creatures, Davis and Marin, Amy's colony, the mountains, the coast. He showed them his notes and Amy's journal, explained the safe routes and the dangers, shared every piece of information that might help someone else survive. "This changes things," Anya said, studying the maps. "If we can establish contact with other colonies, share information, maybe trade, we might actually have a chance at more than just surviving, at building something." That's what Amy said. Joel looked around at the faces of people he'd lived with for 7 years. His people, his family. "We're not alone, there are others out there, and we can help each other." Marcus clapped him on the shoulder. "You did good, kid, really good." Joel went to his small room that night exhausted. Boy curled up beside his cot and Joel lay in the dark, listening to the familiar sounds of the bunker. He was home. He'd made it home. And he wasn't the same person who'd left. He'd crossed 135 kilometers twice. He'd fought creatures that should have killed him. He'd faced his fears and survived. He'd kept his promise, not just to Amy but to himself. Joel closed his eyes and slept without nightmares for the first time in 7 years. 6 months later, the bunker had changed. They'd used Joel's information to establish radio contact with 3 other colonies, including Amy's. Trade routes were being mapped. Information was being shared. People were beginning to think about the surface not just as a place of death, but as a place that could be navigated, understood, survived. Joel led supply runs now. He taught others what Davis and Marin had taught him, what he'd learned through trial and error. He was good at it, better than good. He'd become one of the bunker's best surface survivors. The fear was still there. It probably always would be. But it didn't control him anymore. He'd learned to feel it and keep moving, to acknowledge the terror and fight anyway. One evening, while Joel was checking the radio frequencies, Anya found him. "There's something you should hear," she said, handing him a message they'd received. "From the coast." Joel read it. Amy's colony was sending a delegation inland, establishing contact with other settlements. They'd be in the area in 2 weeks. Amy would be leading the team. "She's coming," Joel said, surprised at how that made him feel. Not anxious, not afraid, just glad. "You told her to find you next time," Anya said. "Looks like she listened." When Amy arrived 2 weeks later, she brought 5 others with her, all competent surface survivors. Joel met them at the bunker entrance, Boy at his side, and when Amy saw him, she smiled. "You look good," she said. "Healthy, happy even." "I am," Joel gestured to the bunker behind him. "Welcome, we have a lot to share." They talked for days, Amy's team and Joel's bunker, sharing information and stories and hope. They made plans for regular contact, for trade, for building a network of colonies that could support each other. It was the beginning of something. Not a return to the old world that was gone forever, but something new, something that could grow. On the last night of Amy's visit, she and Joel stood at the bunker entrance, looking out at the ruins under the stars. "Thank you," Amy said quietly, "for making that journey, for bringing back information that's saving lives, for proving it could be done." "Thank you for being worth finding," Joel replied, "even if you weren't who I remembered." "Are you happy here?" Joel thought about it, about the fear he'd overcome, about the people he'd helped, about the life he was building. "Yeah, I think I am. Not the happiness I expected, but something better, something real." Amy nodded. "That's all any of us can hope for now. Real things, real connections, real survival." "Not just survival anymore," Joel said. "We're starting to live again." They stood together in comfortable silence, 2 people who'd survived the end of the world and found their way back to something like hope. They weren't the teenagers who'd promised to find each other anymore. They were something better, survivors who'd become builders, fear-broken people who'd learned to be brave. Boy barked a happy sound and Joel smiled. The dog had survived, they'd all survived, and tomorrow they'd keep surviving, keep building, keep moving forward. The world above was still dangerous, still full of creatures that could kill them in seconds, still broken beyond any hope of restoration. But it was theirs, and they were learning to live in it.